Hello, fellow workers of Glorious Hope. We anticipate that all of you had a wonderful journey in our previous sessions, that your participants remain excited and are making meaningful realization as they connect their past to their current behaviors, and that you, their life coaches, are learning as well. Last session, we discussed the necessity of trials for our character to change. In the past two sessions, we explored character and how God shaped and formed it into Christ-likeness. Often through experience we hope we never face, yet they are necessary. So we truly learn and experience His grace and presence in our lives. This week, we will explore relationship. You have heard that Christianity is not a religion, but a relationship. What does that really mean? Perhaps a verse from Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount will explain it. Let me read to you the verse. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only our brothers or your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do, do not even the Gentiles do the same? You therefore must be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect. In practical terms, this passage calls us to love and show kindness to people outside our comfort zone, such as strangers, difficult co-workers, or opponents, rather than loving only our friends. Jesus teaches us that radical love is all about contrasting common social reciprocity with God's way of dealing with humanity. He calls us to imitate God's unconditional love, move beyond basic transactional relationship, and grow into spiritual maturity. The perfection mentioned means a complete whole love that mirrors God's unconditional care for everyone. We are seen as growing toward maturity with God's grace rather than achieving instant sinlessness on our own. In the Bible, perfection means completeness, wholeness, spiritual maturity rather than making zero mistakes. When Jesus tells people to be perfect, the original language points to growing up, finishing a goal, and loving others completely just as God does. Our relationship with God and our relationship with others are deeply connected. How we treat the people around us often serves as a practical measure of our spiritual life, as love, forgiveness, and compassion toward others naturally mirror the grace we receive from God. Here is what what John wrote. He said, if anyone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he's a liar. For he who does not love his brother, whom he has seen, cannot love God, whom he has not seen. If we say we love God but hate our brother or our neighbor or the people are close around us, we're not telling the truth because we cannot love an unseen God while mistreating people we see every day. When we experience God's patience, mercy, and love, they overflow into how we treat our family, our friends, and even strangers. Conversely, holding on to bitterness or judgment towards others can block our spiritual intimacy and peace. That's why true faith is centered on a personal, loving connection with God through Jesus Christ, rather than on a mechanical list of rules, rituals, and traditions. That's why this step that's why this step of making a list of people we have harmed comes later in the sequence of steps, because applying it requires maturity more than just following a formula. Making amends involves more than following a formula. It requires genuine emotional maturity. This process calls for true accountability, letting go of ego, and the courage to put the other person's healing before our own comfort. Simply saying sorry often becomes a superficial gesture to ease our discomfort, but authentic amends demand profound character changes and sincere self-reflection. Immature responses rely on defensiveness, making excuses or proving that our intentions were good. Maturity lets you sit with the uncomfortable truth that our good intentions do not erase the pain we cause. Merely applying a fixed treats an apology like a task to clear our own guilt. True maturity turns the focus outward to validate the other person's pain without demanding that they forgive us or comfort us in return. Words are cheap and easy to deploy. Real amends require long-term behavioral change, known as living amends, which tests our patience, consistency, and true commitment to being different. A mature person accepts that the person we have hurt may not want to reconnect. We cannot control the reaction or force a reconciliation, and respecting their boundaries is part of the accountability. That is why we need first to understand the condition of our heart so we can willingly apply making amends and a change of character to accomplish this experience. The Apostle Peter also shared his experience about the importance of relationship in our walk. We must actively stop doing wrong, do what is right, and aggressively chase after peace with others instead of seeking revenge. It is a direct call to action to turn from evil to do good and pursue peace. Let me read what he wrote. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it. Peter emphasized that we should pursue peace actively, not just passively. Peace does not happen by accident. The word pursue means to run after it or hunt it down with total effort, refusing to let anger or arguments win. When someone hurts or insults us online or in person, we need to stop ourselves from fighting back or posting a mean reply. Go out of your way to calm down angry situations, fix broken relationship, and choose gentle words instead of harsh ones. Make a daily choice to replace bad habits or unfair thoughts with helpful actions that build people up. The Apostle Peter, known for being impulsive, remember when they arrested Jesus? In his enthusiasm to defend him, Peter hastily drew his sword and cut off the ear of one of the servants of the high priest. Jesus quickly rebuked Peter and told him to sheath or to put back his sword in the sheath. Peter learned from Jesus then and now and is now narrating what we should be doing, namely to do good by actively seeking peace. Literally, it pictures the binding or joining again of that which has been separated or divided, thus setting it as one again. It follows that peace is the opposite of division and dissension. Peace is a state of harmony. That is the opposite of war. The ultimate peace is the state of our reconciliation with God when we believe in Him through the works of Jesus Christ, which we did in step 2 of the steps and trusted Him in step 3. Because of the ultimate peace with God, we are we are capable of making amends because the peace of God will overflow in us. If we truly say we are followers of Jesus Christ, as John wrote, he said, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. And you also are to love one another. By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Jesus instructs us, all of us, to love each other, just as He loved all of us, sacrificially and without condition. This kind of outward focused love is the ultimate sign that you and I are His disciples. And it changes us from the inside out, influencing our actions. It moves our deepest desires from being served to serving others. Instead of seeking validation, comfort, or control, we aim to mirror Jesus' generous heart. Such love fosters resilience, patience, and humility. Genuine character develops not when life is easy, but when we choose to show grace to difficult people. It grounds our self-worth in being loved by God because our identity rests in Him. We don't need to manipulate, compete, or tear others down to feel worth. It replaces self-centered worry with empathy for others. When conflict occurs, our first thought shifts from how was I wrong or how can I show grace. May you have a wonderful week ahead of you. May you have a fruitful session with your participants and may God bless you. Thank you all. Thank you.